das kleine Kinderlein, der muss das nicht betrüben, muss demütig sein, mit Maria, der Jungfrau rein. O Jesu, liebstes Kinderlein, du kleines Kinderlein, es ist doch die Liebe dein, schleus in das Herz mein, die große Liebe
Your condition has greatly improved, Lord Blakeney. You should have many more years ahead of you. Take me to Park Lane.
Sir, I am most dreadfully sorry. Let me help you with those. I do apologise, sir.
I thought I asked not to be disturbed.
No, sir. Sit. You are surprised to see me, sir?
No mystery about that, my good man. Whatever can I do for you?
Well, I have a conscience, you see, sir. When I saw you into this house, I says to myself, I'll just step in and see that kind gentleman, and tell him that I apologise for my gruff manner, that there really was no harm meant, and that I am much obliged to him for picking up my books.
You make too much of a trifle.
You'll find my bookshop at the corner of Church Street, and very happy to see you, I am sure. Perhaps you collect yourself?
There I write, mainly, when I have the time, and I also...
British birds, Catalyst, the Holy War. Why,
Sir.
with 5 volumes you could just fill that gap on your second shelf there. Does it not look untidy, sir?
Holmes, I owe you 1,000 apologies, my dear Watson. I had no idea you would be so affected.
Is it really you?
Well, I am no spirit, Watson, but I fear I have given you a serious shock.
My dear chap, I am overjoyed to see you.
I'm glad to stretch myself, Watson. It really is no joke for a tall man to take a foot off his stature for hours on end.
Just as clever as the old days. Really, quite a disguise.
And an absolutely necessary one, I assure you.
But tell me, how did you come alive out of that dreadful chasm?
I had no serious difficulty getting out of it, for the very simple reason that I was never in it. My farewell note to you was entirely genuine. Once written, I then stood at bay at the end of the path. He rushed at me, anxious to revenge himself. Fortunately, I have some knowledge of Bristol. I slipped through Moriarty's grip, and over he went. Before his body had even struck the rocks below, I realised what an extraordinarily lucky chance fate had placed my way. Moriarty had many confederates, Watson, and he was not the only one to swear my death. What an advantage it would be if the world thought me dead at Reichenbach Falls. Knowing that, Moriarty's men would take liberties, and sooner or later I would destroy them.
And having returned to the land of the living, I judge that you have been successful.
I wish it was so, Watson. I left the path by way of the cliff wall, which was not quite sheer. It was not a pleasant business. The fall roared beneath me. I am not a fanciful person, Watson, but I seemed to hear Moriarty's voice screaming at me out of the abyss. I soon realised that I was not alone on the cliff. I had been seen, and not by the lad who delivered the false message. This was another of Moriarty's men, but one much more formidable than a mere lackey. I did not take long to think about it, Watson. I scrambled back down into the path and took to my heels, doing 10 miles over the mountains in the darkness. A week later, I found myself in Florence, with the certainty that no one in the world knew what had become of me. I had only one confidant, my brother, Mycroft. I owe you many apologies, my dear Watson, but it was all important that you should think I was dead.
I do not know if I am convinced of that, Holmes.
Many times have I taken up my pen to write to you, but I always feared lest your affectionate regard for me tempt you to some indiscretion which would betray my secret.
But why the ruse at all, Holmes, when clearly a confederate of Moriarty's witnessed your survival?
Indeed, Watson, the late Professor Moriarty once told me that I was quite ignorant of the full extent of his organisation. He was correct. I called him a spider in the centre of a web, a mastermind, the mastermind. He was one of hundreds. I have spent the last 3 years tracing the strands of the web across Europe and beyond. Persia, Mecca. I visited the Khalifa at Khartoum, and everywhere I travelled, there were the footprints of a vast organisation, too great and embedded to fathom.
You've done this on your own?
Mycroft has communicated my findings to those parties interested, and they, through him, have made a few requests of me. The game has led me home, Watson. The murder of Ronald Adair has betrayed the hand of a certain individual that I wish to see eradicated from the criminal classes.
You know who the murderer is.
We have, if I may ask for your cooperation, a hard and dangerous night's work ahead of us which will, in itself, justify a man's life on this planet. Will you come?
When you like, and where you like.
This is indeed like the old days. But perhaps a bit of dinner first. If I am no spirit, but indeed a mere mortal, I should say it is imperative. I went by our old rooms today.
You've been to Baker Street.
Mycroft had preserved my things perfectly, and Mrs. Hudson had kept them absurdly tidy in some bizarre memorial to my memory. But once there, I realised I was being watched. By some undulation in the thread, word had reached London of my return. My old rooms had immediately been placed under surveillance, and so I foolishly walked into the gaze of my enemies. I recognised their sentinel at once. A harmless enough fellow, Parker by name, a garroter by trade, and a remarkable performer upon the Jews' harp.
I see now the reason for your disguise.
Yes. I was following my own line of inquiry when I unexpectedly encountered you. What a chance, what a shock it gave me.
It is so good to have you back, Holmes. If only Mary were here to see it.
I have found work to be the best antidote to sorrow, my dear Watson. And what work awaits us both tonight? we are.
Surely that is Baker Street.
Exactly. We are in Camden House, which stands opposite our old quarters. Look, but pray, take every precaution not to show yourself. I trust that age doth not wither, nor custom stale my infinite variety.
Holmes!
Well,
It's marvellous.
it really is rather like me, is it not?
I should be prepared to say that it was you.
The credit of the execution is due to Monsieur Oscar Minoir. It is a bust in wax.
But why?
Because, my dear Watson, I had the strongest possible reason for wishing certain people to think I was there when I was really elsewhere.
The man who has had your rooms watched.
Indeed. The bosom friend of the late Professor Moriarty. The man who dropped the rocks at Reichenbach Falls. The most dangerous and cunning man in all of London. That is who is after me tonight.
And he is unaware that we are after him.
How grand it is to be back together on the hunt, Watson. We must now possess our souls in patience.
Holmes. There are 2 men in the street. Holmes. The bust has moved.
Well, of course it moved. Am I such a farcical bungler, Watson, that I should erect an obvious dummy and expect some of the sharpest men in Europe to be deceived by it? Mycroft has moved it some 8 times in the past 2 hours. He moves it from the front so that his shadow is never seen. Ah! Shh! Shh! Colonel. Watson!
Ah, Inspector Lestrade.
It's good to see you back in London, Mr. Holmes.
I got your message, and I came myself.
I thought you might require a little unofficial help. 3 undetected murders in a year won't do, Lestrade. Ah, Colonel. Journeys end in lovers' meetings, as the old play says. I don't believe I've had the pleasure of seeing you ever since you favoured me with those attentions upon the ledge at Reichenbach Fall.
You fiend. You clever, clever fiend.
Ah, Watson, allow me to introduce Colonel Sebastian Moran, once an honourable soldier in Her Majesty's army, and the best heavy game shot the Empire has ever produced. Lestrade, I congratulate you. You've got him. The man the entire police force has been seeking in vain.
Oh? And how's that?
No less than the murderer of the Honourable Ronald Adair, who was shot through the window of his Park Lane residence upon the 30th of last month. With this airgun, I commend it very especially to your attention, Lestrade. Colonel, I wonder that my very simple stratagem could deceive so old a shikari. Have you not tethered a young kid under a tree and lain above it with your rifle and waited for it to bring up your tiger? This empty house is my tree, and you are my tiger. The parallel is exact.
You may, or you may not, have just cause for arresting me, but there is no reason why I should be submitted to the gibes of this person.
Well, that's reasonable enough. Let's be on our way then, Colonel.
Do you think this is over? This is not over. Strands of the web, Mr. Holmes. Strands of the web.
That's enough dramatics for one evening, Colonel.
Come in, Sherlock. The Colonel's nerves have not lost their steadiness, nor his eyes their keenness. Plumb through the middle of the forehead and smack through the brain. He is the best shot in England. Did you observe where the bullet... I have it here. A soft revolver bullet, you perceive.
Who would expect such a thing to be fired from an air gun?
There is genius in it, certainly. You carried it off well, Mycroft. The credit goes solely to you, Sherlock. Sherlock has all the energy in the family. I must return to the Diogenes. All of this time spent away from the club is quite contrary to my nature. I presume Colonel Moran is in the capable hands of Scotland Yard. He will trouble us no more. I recall you spoke the same with regard to the illustrious Professor Moriarty before your little tete-a-tete at Reichenbach Falls. Oh, far be it from me to commit the cardinal sin of presumption. Twice. Good evening, gentlemen, and may your future association prove kinder to your nerves.
In the end, it seems clear that Ronald Adair had discovered that his card partner, Colonel Moran, had been playing foul. No doubt Adair confronted the Colonel and demanded that he resign membership of the club and cease to play cards. Now this would mean ruin to Moran, who apparently lived by his ill-gotten card gains. He therefore murdered the Honourable Adair, who, at the time of his death, was endeavouring to work out how much money he should himself return. Well? Will it pass?
Well, it will be disproved or verified at his trial.
But is it what you have deduced?
Your explanation will suffice for the general populace, to say nothing of Scotland Yard. Perhaps the world is not ready for the truth, Watson.
Ah, another giant rat of Sumatra, then.
As grotesque, but far more subtle. I believe that there were other reasons Moran wanted the young Adair dead.
Such as?
Ah, here we enter into those realms of conjecture, where even the most logical mind may be at fault.
Do you believe that Moran associated with Ronald Adair for a specific purpose?
Oh, undoubtedly. The Colonel knew his father, who had connections to a certain professor in his younger days.
Moriarty.
The same.
So Adair's murder, in some form, was connected to the vast criminal organization of which you told me?
As I said, conjecture. But I have my theories.
Well, of course. Would you like to hear my conclusion?
Please.
And once more, Mr. Sherlock Holmes is free to devote his life to examining those interesting little problems which the complex life of London so plentifully presents.